let's make a short documentary on an active volcano. Recently, I shot a project on Montserrat, this tiny Caribbean island dominated by the Soufriere Hills volcano. This was an eye-opening project, speaking with volcanologists, witnessing the human impact of natural disasters, and capturing images of one of the most unique and beautiful places I've ever visited. Oh, and driving on the left side of the road. The volcano erupted just 28 years ago, and it left much of the island, about 2/3, as this off-limits exclusion zone. So the question becomes, how do we photograph something that we can't get close to? Well, filmmaking is all about problem solving, so let's talk about it. This was a fairly obscure location without too much information available online to go off of for pre-production, and we actually ended up hiring a guide for the first day on the island who basically showed us around and scoped out spots that we could come back to capture more extensively over the following week. He also got us into the exclusion zone, which we'll talk a bit about later on. We couldn't get close to the volcano, but we could see it. So I used my trusty Lumix 70-200 f2.8 to get some telephoto shots of the different volcanic features, like these fumaroles and some hero shots of the summit. But the main problem was that like 99% of the time, most of the volcano was hiding behind the clouds. You could only really shoot the bottom half of it, which limited the details we could pick out. Long focal lengths allowed us to get some shots from the ground, but the majority of the volcano footage, and definitely the best shots, are aerials. We found locations elevated and close to the edge of the exclusion zone where we could get as close as possible, then launch the drone and fly straight towards the mountain. That allowed us to capture all sorts of unique textures of the volcanic landscape, like these pyroclastic deposits and the crumbling edges of the remaining lava dome. But we did have one morning where everything just lined up. The summit finally came out and we were in the perfect place to capture it. I gunned the drone straight for the volcano, completely maxing out the battery to get way closer than I knew was even an option, and ended up with my favorite shots of the entire trip and some of my favorite shots of the past year, flying into the crater and looking up at this towering lava dome above. It was a little ridiculous. I used the DJI Air 3 for this video, which has that additional 70mm camera, which was absolutely indispensable for further punching in on certain details like the fumaroles and the lava dome. Montserrat is a tiny island, so before each drone flight we had to call the airport and tell them where we were flying, how high we were gonna go, and confirm takeoff and landing with the airport, which was kind of fun. They were chill about it. We also had about an hour and a half to capture footage in the exclusion zone, this most visibly affected area with very prominently buried buildings poking up out of the debris and the volcano just looming in the background. With the limited time window we had here, we were trying to be as efficient as possible with how we were shooting and really focused on angles and footage that we could only get in that main central exclusion zone, like shots juxtaposing the affected area with the volcano behind it and the most prominently buried buildings. The next day, we returned to some areas right on the edge of the exclusion zone, so the closest we could get without needing a permit from the government, where we were able to spend some more time poking around, pushing deeper into the affected area, and looking for abandoned spaces and details. I was also able to launch the drone from this area right on the edge and capture more footage of the exclusion zone itself, which was right nearby. And here I focused on angles that didn't work that well from the ground the previous day. Angles showing very prominently buried buildings, wide shots showing the scale of the affected area, and big landscapes that placed the abandoned city within the features of the greater volcanic landscape. We also later shot some angles from other points on the island to show how people are currently living in pretty close proximity to this volcano. In addition to the volcano itself and its landscape, we wanted to show the science associated with it. So we paid a visit to the Montserrat Volcano Observatory, where we were able to take a look at how the volcano is monitored. We started by interviewing the observatory director, Dr. Graham Ryan. This was a very quick interview setup, just found a private room with a window, moved some chairs around, set up 2 quick angles, and then just got audio from the Røde VideoMic Pro on top of my camera. This is the same setup that we've used for our other documentary projects. It's very rough, but it's very quick, and I like how the resulting interview feels very casual and personal. After that, we had a few minutes to capture the observatory's operations room, and again here we are being as quick as possible. Lots of close-ups of various types of monitoring equipment, as well as angles juxtaposing the equipment with the volcano right behind it. We also grabbed a quick, almost like vlog style, just handheld interview shot of Dr. Ryan explaining briefly how the operation is done. We also spent a lot of time just shooting things unrelated to the volcano, like these beautiful beaches and jungles that make up the remainder of the island. Most of our volcano footage is either very dusty and gray or very like clinical and sciencey. So for these, we went in the exact opposite direction, very colorful and lush. Lots of shots at sunrise and sunset, sections of lush jungle high up in the mountains or in deep gorges, and taking advantage of some nice foggy weather that we would usually get up in the mountains in the morning. As with most of my projects, this video includes a lot of archival elements like old maps, documents, and illustrations, and in this case, I wanted them to have like a Lord of the Rings or Pirates of the Caribbean type feel, like that classical adventure vibe. That started with just sourcing the right elements themselves, digging through archives, looking for maps, illustrations, and documents that were actually quite old. I also ran to a few antique stores around town looking for some kind of piratey looking elements to scatter around the edges of the frame. I found these bottles, these old keys, and this magnifying glass, which I had originally gotten just for the vibes, but it ended up making for a really fun, practical way to highlight sections of maps and documents. I wanted some of these shots to look like they had been lit by like candles or a lantern, but I wasn't sure which ones, so I just lit them all normally with my Aputure 120D and then faked the candle lighting in post with an overlay. This project was honestly just a more extreme version of something that I encounter on pretty much every project I take on, which is having to find clever ways to work within restrictions placed on how you can shoot. At the end of the day, creativity is all about recognizing the restrictions on the way you can work and adapting your process to create the best result within those restrictions. If you can do that, you can shoot a great film. But that's all I have for you today. I hope you enjoyed this video, learned something new from it, and if you did, be sure to subscribe to Adorama TV for thousands of other videos just like this one, including some videos exactly like this one, going through other projects and other filmmaking techniques with me, if that's something you want. I don't know. I'm not here to tell you what to do, but you might learn something. So thank you so much for watching this video, and I will see you in the next one.